Oh, hey there, hockey fans. Nick Hart, ladies and gentlemen, coming at you once more with another edition of Bubble Wrap presented by Coors Light. The analysis of the Stanley Cup playoffs that you're used to seeing here, fresh out of the oven for you good folks on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins social media pages. I hope that everyone has enjoyed their week thus far, and I hope that everyone has been enjoying the Stanley Cup Final. It has been a long, long wait for this series. It's not often that we have a Stanley Cup Final in September. In fact, it's never that we award the Stanley Cup in September, but we need not rehash why we're here. Instead, let's spend today talking about what's happened now that we've actually reached the final series of this NHL season. And the last time you guys saw my face here on the Penguins social media channels, well, it was at the start of this series between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Dallas Stars. 3 games have passed since then, and with a victory less than 24 hours ago, Tampa Bay has assumed a 2-1 series lead. This 1-game lead comes after the Bolts actually dropped game 1 to the Stars, but were able to find their game and bounce back in a big way throughout this rough and tumble series between two clubs that are as physical as they are skilled. Let's actually now rewind the clock back to last week and do a step-by-step recap of this Stanley Cup Finals, starting with the aforementioned game 1, a game that went Dallas's way by a score of 4-1, and Dallas was able to really balance their offensive attack in part of this gritty game with 11 different players recording a point throughout the course of this game 1. Now, Braden Point, perhaps a Conn Smythe leader for the Tampa Bay Lightning and leading goal scorer for that team, a sensational young player, led all forwards in the game with over 20 minutes of ice time, but he was -3. Dallas able to keep him in check. Furthermore, the Tampa Bay Lightning power play had a huge chance to get back into the game, maybe even take the lead in that third period with 3 different power play opportunities. Well, they shelled Dallas goaltender Anton Khudobin in that matchup in that third period. In fact, over 20 shots on goal in the third period alone, but the Dallas goaltender they called Dobby stopped all of those shots in the third period and helped Dallas hang on to the game 1 win 4-1. You also saw there, these two teams were throwing their bodies around. I said it was gritty. No kidding. They combined for over 100 hits and 44 blocked shots. That is the most in a Stanley Cup Final game 1 since 2013 between the Chicago Blackhawks and Boston Bruins. But that game actually went to triple overtime. So they had basically 2 games worth to rack up that kind of number. So if you're talking strictly in the realms of regulation, a 60-minute game 1, that is the most physical, the most hits, and most block shots since the NHL started recording the stat back in 1997. So these two teams set the tone in game 1. Dallas takes the 1-0 series lead, but the Tampa Bay Lightning able to find their groove with a hot start in the first period of game 2. The Tampa Bay Lightning rattled off 3 goals in less than 4 minutes of game time, including 2 power play goals where their power play failed them late in game 1. They come out strong in game 2. Nikita Kucherov with 2 assists. Defenseman Victor Hedman also with 2 apples there for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Dallas tried to get their way back into it. In fact, they really turned the tide in the second period with 18 shots on goal, but not enough. It came down to the wire, an offensive zone faceoff in the dying seconds of regulation, but Dallas unable to get a shot off despite winning the faceoff, and Tampa Bay scurries away, having evened the series 1 game apiece, which brings us to yesterday night. Game 3, both of these teams looking to get a leg up on their opponent, or actually I should rewind the clock a little bit here because we got to talk about Nikita Kucherov. I mentioned the 2 assists that he had in that game 2 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Well, with those 2 helpers, he pulled ahead of Martin St. Louis for the Tampa Bay Lightning franchise record for points in a single Stanley Cup playoffs. And don't look now, but his teammate Braden Point is riding shotgun with Kucherov up the Tampa Bay Lightning franchise record books. Now, these stats are as of after Game 3. But you can see Kucherov with 30 points these playoffs. That is the most in a single playoffs in Tampa Bay Lightning franchise history. Furthermore, you can look at the most assists in a single playoffs in Tampa Bay history. Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point, both 1 and 2 in that category with their performances during these Stanley Cup playoffs. And before you say, well, Nick, these guys have had the benefit of having that round robin, those extra 3 games count towards their postseason statistics. So that's a little bit skewed. They have a little bit of a head start on guys like Marty St. Louis, Vinny Lecavalier, Brad Richards, Tampa Bay Lightning legends, guys who won the Stanley Cup back in the mid-2000s with Tampa Bay. Well, Kucherov and Point have actually played in fewer games than everyone else you saw on that list. And furthermore, Nikita Kucherov has been and still continues his stranglehold as the Tampa Bay Lightning all-time leader in playoff points, not just in one playoffs, but throughout an entire career. So Nikita Kucherov and the rest of the Tampa Bay Lightning looking to build off of that Game 2 performance into Game 3, and that's exactly what they did. A dominant showing by the Tampa Bay Lightning. They ultimately walk away with a 5-2 victory. Tampa Bay scored 2 early, including a goal by Nikita Kucherov. They also got a goal from Steven Stamkos. The Tampa Bay Lightning captain made his triumphant return and scored a goal in the first period of his return. Hadn't played in over 200 days, if you can believe that. But an instant impact from Steven Stamkos. Dallas really started to get things going in the latter half of the first period. They really outshot the Tampa Bay Lightning, had a 2-1 deficit going into that second period, and then Tampa Bay just unloaded in the second period, scoring the remaining 3 goals. They outshot Dallas by a whopping 21-4 margin, including a goal by Victor Hedman, 3 points in the game overall for the Swedish defenseman of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And we talked about what the captain, Steven Stamkos, was able to do for Tampa Bay. He didn't last in the game much longer after scoring that goal. But on the other side of the ledger, Dallas's captain, Jamie Benn, he had a rough night, racked up 12 penalty minutes, no points, and he left the game in the third period with an apparent injury. We'll have to continue to monitor the status of Dallas's captain, Jamie Benn, moving forward. But Tampa Bay now has a 2-1 series lead. Victor Hedman gets the game-winning goal, and that goal was his 10th goal of these playoffs. And we showed this graphic before the last time we were here on Bubble Wrap presented by Coors Light. We got to update it now with another goal by Victor Hedman. This is the list of the most goals by a defenseman in a single playoff run in NHL history. Victor Hedman with 10 is now in sole possession of third place all time. Only Paul Coffey and Brian Leetch have scored more goals as a defenseman in a Stanley Cup playoffs. And as we mentioned last time, I'll say it again, every name you see on this list, the other 9 names other than Victor Hedman as part of this top 10, all of those names became first ballot Hall of Famers. Victor Hedman trying to become a first-time Stanley Cup champion. The Tampa Bay Lightning with Hedman on the blue line have come so close so many different times, either bounced in the conference final or actually bounced in the Stanley Cup final in 2015 when they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks, trying to get over the hump this time and finally lift Lord Stanley's Cup and get their names etched on hockey's holy grail. And with Hedman's 10th goal of these playoffs, that came with a power play marker early in the second period of Game 3, continuing a roller coaster trend for John Cooper's Lightning throughout this postseason. So, yes, Tampa Bay's power play failed mightily in that Game 1 loss, but came through big time in Games 2 and 3 of the final. Let's look at the pattern here of Tampa Bay's power play production during these playoffs. They started round 1 against Columbus 0 for 17 on the power play. They couldn't put one to the back of the net on the man advantage in those first 17 opportunities. But then their next 17 trips to the power play, they scored 7 times, over 40% in that stretch. They went ice cold again, scoring only 1 on their next 21 power plays, spanning from the Eastern Conference Final to Game 1 of this Stanley Cup Final, under 5% on the man advantage. But now they could be heating up again. 3 for their last 7 on the power play, and one of those was a garbage time power play at the end of Game 3 last night when the game was already at hand. So Tampa Bay wasn't exactly deploying its all-stars or trying to pad the stats, run up the score there. So effectively, they've gone 50% in their last 2 games on the power play. If they are going on another hot run like they did in the middle of the playoffs before, that could spell really bad news for the Dallas Stars, a team that has taken more penalties than anyone else in these playoffs, and now they have to contend with Steven Stamkos appearing on the Bolts power play. Or do they? Steven Stamkos' return last night was obviously a huge storyline in Game 3, rightfully so. Jumping into the lineup after core muscle surgery kept him out of action for 211 days. That's one heck of an offseason, folks. But he scores a goal right out of the gate there. That's going to go down in history as an all-time great Stanley Cup final moment. In fact, Stamkos is the first player since 1940 to score in his first game of a playoff run that takes place in a cup final. But the celebration may or may not be short-lived because he only played 5 shifts in that game. After scoring that goal at 6:58 of the first period, he left the Tampa Bay bench in some visible discomfort. He did return to the bench for the second and third periods, but he did not log a second of ice time in those final 40 minutes of play. Stamkos' status for Game 4 or any of the remaining contests in the Stanley Cup final is currently unknown. Speaking of Game 4, let's take a look at the remaining schedule now in this Stanley Cup final. We have Game 4 on the docket tomorrow night, Friday night. Lock yourselves up, ladies and gentlemen. Sit on the couch, pop the popcorn. That's a huge turning point in this series, potentially. Can Dallas even it up at 2 games apiece, or will Tampa Bay take a 3-1 series lead? And then back-to-back, folks, back-to-back nights, Friday, Saturday. Your weekend plans are set because Game 5 will be Saturday, September 26th at 8 p.m. Game 6, if necessary, on Monday, and then a potential Game 7 Wednesday, September 30th at 8 p.m. So the Lightning currently lead this series 2-1. We've seen some fantastic individual showings from the Tampa Bay Lightning as part of these first 3 games of the Stanley Cup final. Kucherov with a big Game 2. Victor Hedman with a massive Game 3. Braden Point chipping in at different times during those victories as well. Andrei Vasilevsky sliding under the radar with some huge and timely saves for Tampa Bay in those 2 victories as well. But now let's talk about our performance of the week, and it will not go to any of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Instead, we're handing it off to Dallas Stars goaltender Anton Khudobin for the way he played in Game 1 of this Stanley Cup final against the Tampa Bay Lightning. He recorded 35 saves on 36 shots faced, including fending off a hailstorm of scoring opportunities for the Tampa Bay Lightning in that third period. He stopped all 22 shots that he faced in that third period, helping Dallas get the victory. That was the most saves in a period of the Stanley Cup final since the league expanded to 8 teams in 1967. So an historic showing by the Russian goaltender, and really continues a trend that we've seen from him throughout these playoffs. If you put a lot of pucks on net on Anton Khudobin, there's a good chance he's going to fare very well. Khudobin with 10 games of 30 or more saves this playoffs. That is the most of any goaltender in these playoffs. He has a 9-1 record in those 10 games where he's had to make 30 or more saves. Furthermore, in those contests, he has a 2.59 goals against average and a .930 save percentage. Now, Khudobin, or Dobby, as they like to call him in the Dallas locker room, he did not make it to the end of Game 3. He got the hook, and rookie Jake Ottinger played out the rest of the game, so he didn't get a chance to get up to 30 saves in that one. But, these are still some great showings by Anton Khudobin. You could even say he might have stolen Game 1 for Dallas, and this final could be even more lopsided if not for his play in Game 1. That's why he is our performance of the week. And after these fantastic performances by Dobby, where does the Dallas netminder stand amongst the overall playoff leaders, you may be asking? Well, not as high as you'd think. Let's look at some of the individual leaders in this year's playoffs so far. Starting with the goalies, we set the cutoff at 600 minutes played in this postseason. Carey Price, who bowed out in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs with the Montreal Canadiens, still our leader as he meets that threshold, but not far behind. Andrei Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay Lightning goaltender, with a .928 save percentage. Anton Khudobin, .918 save percentage overall throughout these playoffs. Still good enough to get him onto our top leaderboards here. Then you shift over from the right to the left side of your screen where you see our goals leaders. I finally got to change the headshot. I finally got to change it. Every single episode of Bubble Wrap presented by Coors Light so far this summer, Bo Horvat has been the league leader in goals, but after last night, Brayden Point tallied his 11th goal of the postseason, putting him in the top spot. Also, Victor Hedman, Ondrej Palat, and Joe Pavelski, 3 players also playing in this final, tied with Bo Horvat in second place with 10 tallies overall. And Brayden Point's line mate, Nikita Kucherov, who has really ascended and taken off in this final, elevating his game, leads the entire playoffs with 30 points. Point right behind him with 28. And Nate McKinnon, who had a sensational playoffs for the Colorado Avalanche, he, like Carey Price, bowed out in the second round of this postseason. He's still third overall on the points boards, 25 points for Nate McKinnon, almost a 2-point per game average. But right now it's Nikita Kucherov as our overall leader. And looking at those stats right there, seems like a perfect time to segue into our Conn Smythe leaderboard. Who is leading the race for the MVP trophy of the Stanley Cup playoffs? Boy, oh boy, it is tight. We're seeing some movement there in the middle of our rankings, but at the top, separated by a sliver. I'm going to keep it with Brayden Point at our number 1 spot right now. No one has been able to dethrone him yet from that 1 spot that he moved into a couple episodes ago. But Victor Hedman, his teammate, not too far behind him, and Nikita Kucherov, who leads the playoffs in points, now moving from 4th to 3rd place on our Conn Smythe power rankings. Man, oh man. All 3 of those guys have quite a case to be named MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, it is a little bit of a what have you done for me lately analysis. And with the way Kucherov has been playing so far in this Stanley Cup final, he has maybe a better argument than anyone else on that list. But it is of an MVP for the entire playoffs, not just the Stanley Cup final, the whole playoffs. So I'm keeping Point at number 1. Victor Hedman is having that historic run, though. If he continues to produce, he could win the MVP. Kucherov, if he continues to produce and run amok in the final, you could easily put him up there. We had Miro Heiskanen, the Dallas Stars defenseman. He had a rough game in Game 3, uncharacteristically so that made me comfortable sliding him down behind Nikita Kucherov, but still a beautiful playoff so far by the Finnish defenseman, and so young, too, what he's been able to do in these playoffs. He could very easily rise up the rankings, possibly even to number 1 if Dallas can come back and win the cup on the shoulders of Miro Heiskanen. Goalies, Vasilevsky jumps ahead of Anton Khudobin, and we'll slide Joe Pavelski in the 7th spot, finally knocking Nate McKinnon out of the top 7 of our Conn Smythe power rankings. The remaining games in the Stanley Cup final easily could shake up that list right there, but I feel confident in the top 4. The top 4 guys being far ahead of the pack when it comes to the Conn Smythe discussion. And then on top of that, those top 3 Tampa players duking it out amongst themselves for playoff MVP. But as we wait to see who will win the Conn Smythe, we no longer have to wait to see who will win some of the NHL's top regular season awards. On Monday, the NHL unveiled the winners of some of its top individual awards, including the Hart Trophy for League MVP, the Calder, the Norris, and the VEZINA trophies as well. Let's take a look-see at those winners now on Bubble Wrap presented by Coors Light, starting with the Vezina Trophy given annually to the league's best goalie. No-brainer here for the Winnipeg Jets netminder Connor Hellebuyck, a 31-21-5 record. His 2.57 goals against average and .922 save percentage, both top 10 in the league. He was bested in both those categories by other Vezina finalist Tuukka Rask, but 6 shutouts. That was the most in the NHL. 31 wins among the most in the NHL. He faced more shots than anyone else in the National Hockey League this season. And if we dive into the advanced stats, Winnipeg allowed the second most high danger scoring chances of any team in the league. Connor Hellebuyck was in the net fending off a ton of those. So the fact that he was able to put up those statistics while facing a barrage of shots on an almost nightly basis, very impressive by the American-born netminder. Connor Hellebuyck, who once upon a time was considered one of the best rookies in the league. He did not win the Calder Trophy, but now another member added to that illustrious group. The Calder Trophy winner for the 2019-20 season is Colorado Avalanche defenseman Cale Makar, the alum of the University of Massachusetts Amherst. 12 goals, 38 assists, and 50 points on the year for the rookie defenseman. That was good to be the second most points on the Colorado Avalanche, trailing only the sensational Nathan MacKinnon. He also recorded 3.71 expected goals per 60 minutes. That was the best among all rookies, not just rookie defensemen, all rookies in the National Hockey League this season. So you could really see the kind of impact that he had on the game for the Colorado Avalanche in just his first season as a pro. But this was a tight race. In fact, just a two-dog race for the Rookie of the Year. Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, another rookie defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks, those two players accounted for 169 of the 170 first-place votes when it came to voting for the Calder Trophy. The only other player to receive one first-place vote was another rookie defenseman, Adam Fox, for the New York Rangers. But a tight one there between Makar and Hughes, but Makar takes it home. Makar, though, still a ways away from being considered for the Norris Trophy, which is given to the league's best defenseman, the defenseman who demonstrates the most all-around ability at the position. That's how the NHL phrases it. And this year, there was a lot of discussion going into this one. 3 finalists: Washington Capitals' John Carlson, Nashville Predators' Roman Josi, and Tampa Bay Lightning defenseman Victor Hedman, who we've talked about his merits a lot here on Bubble Wrap. So who did the Norris go to? Nashville Predators defenseman Roman Josi. 16 goals, 49 assists for 65 points this season. That was 10 points behind John Carlson, who a lot of people thought had a great case, perhaps even the best case for the Norris. But here is where Josi really separated himself from Carlson when it comes to the discussion for winning the NHL's Best Defenseman Award. 25 minutes, well over 25 minutes of time on ice per game. That was third among all players in the National Hockey League. Plus, his 260 shots on goal ranked first among all defensemen. So he's on the ice a lot, impacting the game offensively, as you can see by his statistics there, but also way, way better defensively in his own zone this season than John Carlson. John Carlson actually had a negative impact if you dive into the advanced analytics when it comes to goals allowed, scoring chances allowed for the Washington Capitals, whereas Josi just dynamite at both sides of the ice, and he was dynamite in the second half of the season for the Nashville Predators, over a point per game, 39 points in the last 37 games of this past NHL regular season. He is also the first Swiss player to win any major NHL award, the Vezina, the Norris, the Hart, what have you. Roman Josi making history by being the first Swiss player to win any major NHL award when he takes home the Norris Trophy. Also, despite the litany of fantastic defensemen the Nashville Predators have had, Roman Josi also the first Nashville Predator to ever win the Norris Trophy. But we still have one more left, and it was another history-making award, the Hart Trophy, given annually to the league's MVP. And this one belongs to Edmonton Oilers forward Leon Draisaitl, the Deutschland Dangler. 43 goals, 67 assists for 110 points. And think about this too, folks. This was a shortened season because of the pandemic, and he was still able to get to 110 points despite not playing a full 82-game season. That was 13 more points than the next closest player in the league. That was actually his teammate Connor McDavid. He is the first German to win MVP in NHL history. Draisaitl also takes home the Ted Lindsay Award, which is the most outstanding player as voted by the NHL players. So he's voted MVP by media and also voted most outstanding player by his peers. A sensational season by Leon Draisaitl. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see Draisaitl and McDavid go deep in these Stanley Cup playoffs. We're still waiting for that long and signature playoff run from that Oilers group, but still some nice hardware going home with Leon Draisaitl after that fantastic season. Perhaps the best season by a German player ever in NHL history. And that is the end of the NHL awards. And as I quickly check the clock here, we didn't have a lot of time for the Hockey Heartline the last time we were here on Bubble Wrap, but I think we can get to the callers this time. Let's dial it up, folks. It's now time for the Hockey Heartline, where we take your calls from the fans, these very, very real calls with very real queries from you interested hockey fans. Those of you that have been following us here on Bubble Wrap throughout the summer know what this is all about. So let's get it started here. Let's kick things off. Who's our first caller? We have Billy D from Plains. Billy D, what do you got for me?
Nick, why don't you tell me about that Andre Palat?
Yeah.
I remember years and years ago in the AHL, he was tearing it up with the Norfolk Admirals, but nobody talks about him. It's Braden Point that, Victor Hedman that. What about Palat? Tell me about him.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the question, Billy D. Andre Palat has had a really good playoffs, a real under-the-radar performer for the Tampa Bay Lightning during this postseason because, as that caller said, a lot of the attention goes to Kucherov, Point, Victor Hedman, because they're superstars. Everyone wants to know when Steven Stamkos is coming back. All eyes are on him. So Ondrej Palat kind of slides under the radar a little bit, despite the fact that he has 10 goals after last night's showing. And he's a player that, really complements that top line with Point and Kucherov, because he's the guy that's willing to go down and get some dirt underneath his fingernails. He's great in puck retrievals, great on the forecheck, creates space for Kucherov and Point to work on the perimeter and in the slot where he can go to the front of the net, maybe slide in the back door for a slam dunk one-timer or get a shot going off of his shin guard or something, just creating havoc. Because he plays that role, I think he sort of, weaves in and out of people considering him a grinder, but he's not really a grinder. He's more skilled than that, but he has a little bit more sandpaper to him than a true superstar like a Kucherov or what Brayden Point is becoming for Tampa Bay. So he falls a little bit under the radar as a result. But I love the way he plays the game, the way he complements that top line for Tampa Bay and how good they've been throughout the entire postseason, especially these last 2 games of the final. But this has been the story for Ondrej Palat his entire career. He is a guy who has been unfazed by when the game gets hard and the games get important in the playoffs. Here are some numbers we put together on what Ondrej Palat has been able to do in the playoffs throughout his career. You compare his points per game in the regular season to the playoffs, they're almost identical. 328 points in the regular season and almost 500 NHL games played. That's 0.66 points per game, once again, far from superstar level production, but it doesn't take a step back at all in the playoffs when it's supposed to be harder to score goals and create offense. 0.65 points per game. And that's been the story for Ondrej Palat for a long time. You go back to, as the caller said, when he was tearing it up in the American Hockey League as a part of that legendary Norfolk Admiral squad. In his AHL career, Ondrej Palat averaged 0.7 points per game. In the playoffs, he elevated that to 0.97 points per game, almost a full point per game in the Calder Cup playoffs. Call him Playoff Palat, because this is a guy who shows up when the game matters most. When the game gets tough, he raises his game and then also allows the game to be a lot easier for some of the more skilled compatriots that he plays with, such as Brayden Point, Nikita Kucherov this season. All right, so thank you for that call, Billy D out in Plains. Now let's throw it out to Bartholomew on the Hockey Heartline. Bartholomew calling us from Delaware. Bartholomew, give it a go.
Nick, big fan, big Penguins fan. I like the videos.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Bartholomew.
Yeah, so with Tampa Bay now taking a 2-1 lead in the Stanley Cup Finals last night, I wanted to know what you think Dallas has to do or Dallas has to change to get themselves back in it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bartholomew. First of all, I don't like the way that's phrased. It's only a 2-1 series deficit. I know it feels a lot more dire when the Stanley Cup is on the line, but I wouldn't say Dallas is out of the series at all. But in the spirit of your question, what does Dallas need to fix after dropping 2 in a row if they want to be the ones lifting Lord Stanley at the end of this unprecedented summer tournament? A couple of things come to mind. First of all, they need to be more disciplined. They're taking far too many penalties, and it's really coming back to bite them now. They've been able to survive kind of with a decent penalty kill and a great power play in their own right throughout these playoffs. But let me consult my notes here. Yeah, the Tampa Bay Lightning have been shorthanded 95 times in these Stanley Cup playoffs. That is the most of any team in the postseason, with Tampa Bay's power play seemingly heating up. They need to find a way to keep their egos in check, keep their tempers down, just worry about the task at hand and not take any stupid, unnecessary penalties, which they've been guilty of doing throughout these playoffs. And as I say that, keep egos in check and keep your temperature down, they need to find a way to keep their intensity consistent. We've seen them kind of had a parabolic shifts in momentum throughout these entire playoffs. A big reason why they've been able to pull off so many comebacks in these playoffs is that they never quit. They can go on a heater in the blink of an eye, but they've also been known to go to sleep for long stretches in these playoffs. And a great example of that would be Game 1. They let Tampa Bay rack up 22 shots in the third period of Game 1. They were able to eke out the victory there thanks to Anton Khudobin. But then, Game 2, there were long stretches that belonged to Tampa Bay. Game 3, Dallas had a great end of that first period. No reason to believe they couldn't carry that momentum into the second, except Tampa Bay dominated that entire middle frame, and it was far too much for Dallas to come back to at this point. They've been able to make those comebacks before. Tampa Bay is not letting that happen. They're just putting up too much offense during those times when Dallas falls asleep. And after the game last night, Dallas head coach Rick Bowness actually said, our intensity dropped off. That's what he called it. Their intensity dropped off. No more intensity drop-offs. They want to go the distance here. And I think Dallas is probably missing the services of center Radek Faksa, a player that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, doesn't get a ton of attention. A decent defensive player, nothing flashy about him, a good third-line center, also good on the penalty kill. Once again, go to my notes on Radek Faksa. 42.1% of his draws in these playoffs came in the defensive zone. That was the most of all Dallas centers. Now, Faksa hasn't played. He's been injured, unfit to play, as they're calling it, since Game 3 against the Vegas Golden Knights in the Western Conference Final. He's a guy that's not going to rack up a ton of headlines, and it's not that his defensive stats are Selke trophy worthy or anything like that, but I just think losing that little bit of depth down the middle really wears on you down the line. I'm sure Dallas is hoping that Radek Faksa can come back soon and perhaps get them back into things here. We got time for one more call here on the Hockey Heartline. Let's try and get it in quick from Jimmy from DuPont. Jimmy, hit us up. What do you got to say, buddy? You're on the Hockey Heartline.
Hey, Nick, let's talk defense.
Let's go. Let's go.
Everyone keeps talking about Victor Hedman. People are not giving as much attention anymore to Heiskanen and the whole Dallas D. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, Miro Heiskanen, he's been so good at such a young age, too. I know we keep talking about Victor Hedman. I've been tweeting a lot about Victor Hedman because he has been a sight to behold in these playoffs, the way he plays at both sides of the ice. Miro Heiskanen had a really, really tough Game 3, but I really don't think that should take away from his overall performance in these playoffs. He's having one of the most productive, statistically, seasons by a defenseman of his age in league history. And even stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, you can really count on Miro Heiskanen doing. He's been, he's a true up-and-comer. He's not an up-and-comer anymore. He has arrived. Miro Heiskanen is here, folks. Get used to saying that name for a long time in the NHL, hopefully a star for the rest of his career. But then you look at what the Dallas defense has done overall. This is something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, much like Miro Heiskanen being overlooked lately. A lot of Dallas's offense comes from the blue line. You look at the all-time production by defensemen of a team in a single Stanley Cup playoffs, and Dallas is right up there, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the Edmonton Oilers defense of those fire wagon teams in the 80s, they put up 77 points among all of their team defensemen back in 1985, but then keep sliding down the list. Dallas, 61 combined points in these playoffs by defensemen after Heiskanen put one in the third period last night against Tampa Bay. This is, one of the best showings we've seen offensively by defensemen since Brian Leetch and the New York Rangers lifted the Stanley Cup back in 1994. So not only is Heiskanen probably being overlooked, as the caller referred to, that's going to be something myself and other pundits throughout the hockey world have to make sure not to do moving forward, because Heiskanen is here. But the Dallas defense overall has done a great job of producing offense. They have a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde to them. One night they could score all 3 goals for your team. The next night, they could be giving up 3 goals, but then they could also lock it down and play a tight defensive game. They were one of the best defensive teams in the league during the regular season. Now it's been all about the offense for the Dallas Stars in these Stanley Cup playoffs, and they're looking for more offense as we continue to move through here in the Stanley Cup Final. And I should remind you folks here as we close down the phone lines on the Hockey Heartline that it is the Stanley Cup Final, not the Stanley Cup Finals. It is singular, not plural. It is the last series, one series of the playoffs, the last series, not the finals, okay? I feel like we have to correct people on this sometimes. Only one series, the final series, Stanley Cup Final. When you take your test at the end of the year, you're taking your finals because you have more than one. But then if you only have one test left, oh yeah, I got to take my chemistry finals. I got to take my accounting finals. No, take your accounting final. You take your chemistry final. It's the Stanley Cup Final. And that is how the Stanley Cup Final looks as we head into Game 4 tomorrow night. The Tampa Bay Lightning with a 2-1 series lead. We got back-to-back tilts. Friday, Saturday. Park it on the couch, ladies and gentlemen. I know that's what I'm going to be doing. It's going to be an exciting time this weekend. Maybe Lord Stanley will be ushered out onto the ice this weekend, or maybe the Dallas Stars can extend things. And if they do extend it to 7 games, game 7 scheduled for next Wednesday, you can expect to see us that afternoon here on Bubble Wrap previewing a game 7. But if we don't see you again, ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate your viewership throughout this entire summer. I hope you've had fun, because I've had a blast doing these Stanley Cup final updates for all you folks out there. Enjoy the games this weekend. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know who you're rooting for. Go Stars, go Bolts, whoever you pick. Just enjoy the games, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching.